when I talk about horror stories and lending, it's cattle and fraud.
Oh, I can't wait.
I mean, there's something. Of course, there's some really good things out there right now.
And welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus, 1:05 in the afternoon on this Monday, January. June. How about June, boy?
Goodness.
I know it's cooler than normal, but it's not that cold. June 17th, and I want to thank everybody for joining us again. I'm Chief Meteorologist Dean Wysocki, along with our wonderful, talented Ag Director Bridgette Readel. Justin Storm is playing hooky today. He could have picked a better weather day to play hooky, I'll say that.
I'm telling you right now, if you don't know what day it is, I'm going to play that game all show long.
I'm sure you will.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks for tuning
Woo,
in.
yeah.
Goodness.
How was your weekend?
Dandy. Weather-wise, I think you had a pretty good one. I have had several folks tell me the whole week is going to be rainy, but I don't quite believe that, Dean. I've been watching.
Just tonight and tomorrow.
Okay, so I'm on the road tomorrow night and Wednesday. Does that mean there will be any major storms?
You're on the road tonight.
Tomorrow night, Tuesday night,
Tomorrow
and
you're
Wednesday.
fine.
Okay.
Yep. Nope, you're good to go.
All right.
See,
good.
you travel well in the summer. You don't travel well in the winter.
Not even close.
Yeah, it
hate
usually doesn't work out quite well. We do have some storms in the forecast, though. In fact, those storms will arrive here after about 7, 8 o'clock tonight. We're looking at, some filtered sunshine out there right now, a little more sunshine in the Northern Valley. Temperatures currently in the upper 60s in the Northern Valley, and we're hanging on to 74 right here at the studio. And wind's not that strong, but as we head into tonight, a warm front will be lifting north. This storm system approaching our area tonight has winter storm warnings in effect with it. You heard that right. Out in areas of western Montana and Idaho. Not totally unheard of, but it's a little odd to have snow levels down to about 6,000 feet for this time of the year, even out west.
Serious. I've got a buddy on Twitter in the Bridgette area, and he just said that's not really a surprise for this time of year.
It's not unheard of. It's just
it's not great.
It's unpleasant.
Yeah, if you've got livestock out on pasture, if you were trying to do some haying, this is probably going to poorly influence your decisions.
No doubt. So that storm system, when it pulls our way tonight, will increase our showers and thunderstorms. Some of those could be on the strong side. And we're going to get locally heavy rain with this overnight tonight as well. And then the first half of the day tomorrow, still a few leftover showers and storms in the morning. And then we'll turn breezy and cooler in the afternoon after a morning high in the low 70s. We'll fall into the 60s in the afternoon with breezy conditions down into the 40s tomorrow night. Man. And then as we head into Wednesday and Thursday, we'll see a little more sunshine. We're still stuck in the 70s, though. And then another storm Friday and Saturday of this week.
I would like to ask you about some posts I saw over the weekend, literally fence posts with rain gauges on them. By the way, my WDAY rain gauge is up on a post in my yard, so I can give you official weather measurements.
It better be.
It is. But this was down, I want to say Stewart, Minnesota. They had 9.5 inches of rain in one shot, and there were areas down to 3.5.
That doesn't surprise.
What's going on?
They just had training of thunderstorms going over the same areas. Now, think of the wintertime when we have banding of the snow. You get those narrow bands of just heavy snow.
Right.
That's what we're going to have set up over our area tonight. So there might be areas that get a half inch of rain. There might be areas that get 3 inches of rain. Thus, there's a flood watch out in effect for the entire area, just to blanket. And that doesn't mean everybody's going to see flooding rains, but it blankets the area because you don't know where that banding is going to set up until it sets up. So.
Look, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer on this situation, but some of the pictures I saw were rain gauges on fence posts, and you would have thought that was off the end of their dock at the lake.
Wow.
There was so much water.
Jeez. And those same areas were in drought conditions all last summer. I mean, it was just what it did. Now, this is great for the reservoirs, fills up all the basins and all that, but man, a little bit too much of a good thing, that's for sure. So we were not expecting that much rain here, but we are going to see at least a possibility of some flooding as we head into the overnight hours.
Now, I had several questions earlier today in regards to our Here We Grow, our 20 acres of corn that we're custom farming north of Glendon, Minnesota at Averill. And we have some pictures for those of you on the live stream. What a treat for you. You get to see how our corn looks. We have our sign up. So if you are traveling Clay County 26 east of Harwood on your way out to the Minnesota Lakes country, you can drive right by, see our corn, keep an eye on it. I look forward to many of you sending me your photos and responses of what you're seeing out in that field. And then as Addison pulls up some pictures for us, we saw that our corn got sprayed this morning. So I know that we have it pre-down. That was an acetochlor atrazine mixture that went on early on in the corn. We then also are now seeing some post-application, and that's Lotus with a Power Max on it. So right now we're going to clean up any broadleaves and grass. If you look at that corn right now, it's certainly staged much higher than the last time I was in the field. It's probably getting close to my knee high.
I was just going to say, it looks like pretty close to knee high there.
We're going to beat the knee high by the 4th of July in this field.
We always do.
I can only hope. And thank you to many of our sponsors who are a big part of this project. One of them is a Dairyland Seed. They are doing a fantastic job of providing us with a premier hybrid of corn. It's going to hopefully hit those big bushels that Justin is going for. And then also to Ellingson Drainage, because they made sure that the surface drainage on that field kept our corn from sitting in standing water. Corn doesn't love that. And it's okay for it to have moist soils, because then you want to see your root system penetrate down and spread out. And that also helps later on in the season with good standability. When we get some of those strong winds, the ones that you keep sending, that's not funny. Last week was a little rough.
Weekend was.
But that keeps corn from tipping, leaning, etc., especially in wetter soils.
I learned something new over the weekend.
Your middle name? Kidding. I'm
Oh
only
man,
kidding.
my
Sorry.
middle name. If we ever heard our middle name growing up, we were in big trouble. So believe me, I know it well. So I learned that there's a farm, and I can't remember. It's just south of the FM area. You'll probably know it. The majority of the corn that's grown on that farm is used by Crown Royal.
Oh, they're not the only ones. I mean,
Right.
there's some very unique corn or designations of corn in this area. So yes.
Do you know what the city name is?
I think it's probably best we make sure that we have permission to talk about that, because
good point,
sometimes when you have a contract, you don't want people to know where that corn is
Gotcha.
at,
All right,
because agroterrorism is real. And people will actually go out there and do nefarious things to your crop or animals.
You could tell me off air.
That's okay.
Yeah.
And then that's why I keep, Cooper, our mascot, right here on the desk. We don't want anything bad to happen to him.
Well, speaking about nefarious actions,
Okay.
what's with the cattle rustling?
Still alive and well.
Tell me more.
All right, so this is west of Mobridge, South Dakota, and this is in Corson County. They are currently missing about 24 head of cattle. They were last seen close to the Standing Rock Reservation. They disappeared about May 1st. There are four-wheeler and ATV tracks that were found in the pasture, also signs that they were loaded into a trailer. And hauled up. So somebody...
They're not going to be put into a Volkswagen.
Not necessarily, no. Remember that picture of the Cadillac with the buffalo in it?
Yeah, right.
But this shows that it was a well-oiled machine that did it. This shows that folks were planning well in advance. They were branded. They not only had a hot brand on their right rib, but there was a freeze brand on the left hip, yellow ear tags, and then they also had their metal bangs vaccination tags on them. So they were well tagged as who their owner was.
Okay, my question. So the individuals that are stealing the herd, what are they going to do with them? They're branded. They can't go and sell them, right?
Well, if there is a buyer on the receiving end who's willing to overlook that and not have a brand released, and some states do not require brand recognition when they come in to processing or feedlots. So understand, like South Dakota is split. You have branding laws West River, but not East River. In North Dakota, we have branding laws statewide. And so there's a lot of variance between all of our states as to what can happen. So if someone was willing to receive them is one thing. For some, it's a lot to swipe 24 head and butcher them all. That's a lot of beef. So you better have some pretty big freezers ready to open up for that. But those types of things can happen. Or they're on a pasture somewhere else, fattening up until the time is right to sell them.
Huh.
But cattle rustling does happen.
Wow.
That's why we have brand inspectors here in the state of North Dakota. They are part of the investigation for that type of thing, as well as in South Dakota.
All right. And the Mexican election, they just elected a new president.
They did.
This
She
is the
is
first female president, right?
Yes. And so Claudia Sheinbaum, am I getting that right?
Okay.
I'm not really necessarily sure I'm saying that right. Now that she has been elected, she truly has more favoritism towards ag imports from the U.S. for Mexico. Their previous president signed a decree in 2020 that was essentially banning the use of genetically modified corn, saying that it was a threat to human health as well as ag traditions and cultural identity in the country. The truth is that's not the case. This was not any part of a problem to human health. Much of the corn that was going into Mexico wasn't necessarily for human consumption either. So roughly 90% of the corn here in the U.S. is from a genetically modified source. And really this had been put into place. The ban was set to start in 25. They backed it up slightly. There was a lot of back and forth over it. But now the look is from the government that will change entirely because their new president does not really have a concern about the ban. She's willing to say, let's actually do some trade. That would be good for all of us.
That is good news.
It's much better.
Good.
I mean, let's face it. Right now we have been surpassed as not only the number one exporter for corn, but also for soybeans. And the markets that we want worldwide are important to protect and to continue to sell to.
Yeah, no doubt.
So we don't want that to dissipate.
No doubt. I was watching. Have you seen the series Blacklist? Did you watch that when it was on? It's on Netflix now.
I am a horrible TV watcher, so no.
So there's an episode, in fact, I'm on that episode right now where they're hunting these people on the blacklist, and one of the people on the blacklist was somebody from the cartel, and instead of drugs, they're into avocados now.
That's a big deal. So we've talked about this on the show.
I think this is true.
No, we've talked about this because the areas that are most likely to grow avocados also have a lot of drug runners in them because it's not like normal orchards. They're usually in the higher elevations in the mountainsides. But the other thing was the cartels were building up and still are building up illegal damming and irrigation for the avocado orchards, which was starving off villages and smaller farmers further downhill from them. So this is actually a big fight right now. Yes, the cartels are taking the water for the avocado market. And so it's hurting a lot of villages and some of these subsistence farmers downstream.
Well, I wonder if the new...
she's got some.
I wonder if she'll crack down on that then.
If the new Mexican president can step into that, she has got a lot ahead of her to
Yes.
take on the cartel.
Yeah, right.
Whether it's cocaine or avocado, some of you are addicted to both.
Oh, man. Well, we got a special guest coming on
We
today.
do, and I'm so glad I finally got to meet him in person today. And that is Lynn Paulson. He is Senior Vice President with Bell Bank here in town. Bell Bank also has an event coming up in July. That's an Ag Outlook, and I've been to it. It's great, especially with some of the folks that they bring in, like Dr. David Cole, who is Professor Emeritus at West Virginia, if I'm not mistaken. Virginia Tech. So we are going to visit with our guest today with Lynn. As soon as we come back, don't go anywhere. We want to be a part of our conversation. You can reach us on the Red Wing Shoe line, 701-293-9000. Be right back. And welcome to Weather and Ag in Focus. There is our goat. Never a day goes by without him. All right. And never a day should go by where you don't take the opportunity to impart in North Dakota Sweet Crude. You can have it on the rocks. You can get North Dakota Sweet Crude Orange with just a splash of orange in its fine, smooth cinnamon taste. And you can find lots of different ways to try it. There are multiple recipes at crudespirits.com, and they will be doing taste testing on coming up here in June. Shoot, I thought I had the date for June, but I guess I don't have it on this list. But I bet it's at crudespirits.com where you can go in and try some taste testing.
There you go.
And,
And the orange, trust me, goes good with ice cream. Maybe,
yes.
Maybe put it in a blender.
A little milkshake.
Little milkshake out of
New
that.
version of a White Russian.
So good.
Oh, okay. So one of our opportunities that we have on the show is to have guests come in. And someone who I finally got to meet in person today is Lynn Paulson. He is Senior Vice President with Bell Bank. And Lynn, if I'm not mistaken, farm kid from Benson County, North Dakota.
That's correct.
And you have you've got a fair history of working here in ag lending.
About 40 years worth. So you've seen a lot of things over the period of time.
I can't even begin to imagine. Well, let me put it this way. In your young banker's mind, did you look at what the possibility of land prices and land values could be one day?
The old saying, if I knew then what I know now. It's like, yeah, it's interesting how that has just taken off. Yeah, it's, I've been doing this like 40 years, and it's kind of interesting. I think I can only remember 2 times over those 40 years that people ever regretted buying land, right? Even if they paid too much. I always thought about buying land as kind of like having a kid. You never think you can afford it, but you always find a way to make her work.
Right.
But at some point, the numbers simply don't work. But it's a generational investment. A lot of times land only comes up once in a generation. And if it's a strategic purpose, it just sometimes makes sense. I bought land at times, so I probably overpaid at the time, but strategically where it was, it made sense.
So when you say you only think about 2 historical times where folks weren't happy with the time that they bought land, do you remember what that time frame was?
One was the 80s.
Okay, fair enough.
And that was a period of time, of course, where land values spiked up, and then it obviously fell off in the ag crisis. And it with that coupled with 20% interest rates,
yes.
The leverage just took them down. But other than that, for the most part, it's really been a good, 80% of the balance sheets and equity are farmland, right? I mean, that really is the underlying strength of the ag sector. And so there's a lot of financial runway out there given the land values and so forth. But it's kind of interesting. I think the tops are in for the land prices. I mean, I think you're going to see some outliers, whatever, that, may do that. But, coupled with the investors being taken out of the market a little bit because you got, 5% on your CDs, and, the cap rates on real estate are maybe 1 or 2%. I think the other thing is, there's a lot of the cash that's been built up in farming is going to start dribbling off a little bit.
Oh, I think we're going to see some capital erosion real quick here.
No question about it. And so if you're going out to actually buy land and have to finance it, of course, there's a difference between 3 and 4% and 7, 8, 9%, right? So a lot of the lands that have been bought in the last few years has been bought with money already made, cash, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so interest rates become less of a factor. But, when you get interest rates where we are now, leverage that hasn't been a big factor in the past simply because rates are so cheap and capital was cheap, that's coming back into the fold.
Oh, wow.
No. Lynn, is there, obviously interest rates have been high over the last few years. Have you noticed with interest rates coming down a bit, is that helping with lending at all? Or is there really, you haven't seen much change?
Really haven't seen much change at this point. And of course the Fed came out and, now they're saying maybe 1 reduction before the end of the year. So really it hasn't impacted a lot. It's kind of interesting. A lot of folks are just now in the last 6 months or so have actually seen the impact of higher rates because they finally made that first payment on that operating loan that had the higher rates, or they've gone out and, made capital purchases and financed it instead of, like I said, being 3 or 4%, it's 8 or 9. So, but historically, this isn't high rates, right? I mean, we got used to 3 and 4, 5%
right.
rates, whatever, and the highest interest rate loans I made back in the 80s was 21%.
Wow.
So it's
Can you
it's
imagine
different.
that now?
Well, I can, except it's going to be a lot more painful.
Yeah.
Right.
Right now, within our cost of living, our inflationary spending, it's going to make it a lot tougher on
No
people.
question. No question.
So I was taking some messages here from folks that have things to ask about. One of them is, it's probably well known within ag, but maybe not so much to everyone else. Farmland is basically considered your retirement plan when you farm.
It is, the old adage, farmers work all the year and are cash poor, but they die rich.
Right.
And that really is. And again, when you go back and take a look at how much of the balance sheet really is farm equity, that's in real estate. And then, like you said, it becomes a retirement account. We really encourage producers to make investments outside of farmland a little bit. I mean, it is their core. There's no question about it. But a little diversity isn't necessarily bad. But, the real estate rates and the rental rates have been really strong. And so, if they're able to do reasonably well as a retirement plan.
That's a good idea right there. Okay. And then also, I mentioned on earlier shows this morning that with some of the gain that we have seen in cash value or in cash rent, but also in the value of farmland that has been sold, a lot of it's happened in the north central part of the state, Ward County, McHenry, et cetera. What's driving that change up there? Is there any factors that you can think of that make a difference?
That's a great question. I've got land back in Benson County, which is kind of back up.
Right up there.
Right up there. And it seems like a lot of those producers are probably a little bit more conservative than we see in the Red River Valley, right?
Sure.
They haven't gone quite so rapid in what they pay for cash rents and land values, whatever. So there's been I would say there's been a lot of wealth built up in some of those areas over time. And it's kind of interesting, other than maybe, a rainfall and heat units, everything else has been kind of an equalizer with fertilizer and genetics and agronomics. And, my $3,000 land bin back in Benson County raises 200 bushel corn, right?
Right.
And so those farmers have been pretty judicious in terms of how they spent their money. So if some land does come up for sale, they've got the ability to go out and buy it for the most part.
There's some cash reserve.
There really are.
And that's important to realize is that, when you have those good years, hang on to what you can. And it's not easy. It's way easier to rent a new piece of ground or upgrade some equipment.
It's interesting. One of the things that I talk about once in a while is, hallmarks of successful operations. And some people would say, it's how we handle adversity. And I would say it's almost the opposite. How did you handle prosperity?
That's a good question.
What did you do with the money in the years that you made it, right? And some of that's hindsight. You don't really know. But, sometimes, a lot of the profits are taken and, whether it be family living or buying non-earning assets. And there's nothing wrong in that. But, at some point, if those things are there and you're going to have to refinance real estate to pay for your family living and things like that. And on a downturn, then it probably gets to the other side of the coin.
Whew, there's probably going to be some big changes yet to come. I mean, we talk like interest rates and inflation are short term, but not necessarily. I think there's some really big changes globally for ag and for manufacturing that dive into what we do as well. I think that's going to be very much of an effect on all of us.
That's one of the things maybe on a macroeconomic basis, and you were talking a little bit about it earlier, is just, we do a phenomenal job producing crops, and not just in the U.S., worldwide, right? You talked about Brazil and, all the things, and they're eating our lunch and all the exports.
Literally.
And quite frankly, on some of the, the things that they do. But it's just, we just got to mind our P's and Q's. It's going to be a little bit of a downturn, but we've got to find some demand for all the stuff we produce, right? And whether or not it's in energy or sustainable aviation fuel or something, I won't call it another ethanol boom of the, 08, 09, that type of thing, but that really raised the tide of all ships. And so we got to figure it out, because right now, at some point, you can't keep building bins, right? At some point, you got to find some end uses for that product.
Well, I don't know. I mean, Gateway would love it if you kept building
exactly,
more bins.
yeah.
They'd be okay with that. And add a couple of dryers in there.
And Lynn, how much does a farm bill have to do with that?
At this point, I would say very little, simply because it's almost kind of an afterthought a little bit. And, any of the farm programs that have have been ad hoc, right? They're not necessarily part of the farm bill. And I think even NDSU data showed that, or farm management data last year showed that only like 1.6% of revenue was coming out of government payments. So right now it's kind of an after, because time has been pretty good, and it seems to, people are pretty complacent and about the farm bill. But it could be a bigger issue as you go forward, especially on loan rates and different things like that. If a lot of grain is being stored, but for the most part, it hasn't been a big issue.
Okay. Well, we're going to talk more about that, and I have kind of a list of other things to continue to go through. I know you're all shocked. I have a list of questions.
That's a good thing.
All right. We will get to those when we come back. We will continue our discussion with Lynn Paulson. He is a Senior Vice President with Bell Bank here in Fargo, especially in ag lending, and many years of experience to share with us. So stay tuned. We want to talk more with Lynn after this. And thank you for joining us here on Weather and Ag in Focus. We're very, very glad that you're taking the opportunity, because we have the opportunity and are joined in studio with Lynn Paulson. Lynn is the Senior Vice President over at Bell Bank. And when I think of Bell Bank, it especially strikes a chord for the Fargo area. But how big is your reach, Lynn? Do you have farm producers in quite a large spread?
We really do. We got really two parts of the business. We call it our direct side, where we make direct loans to ag producers, and that's pretty much the Red River Valley, and we go down the I-10 or the Highway 10 and I-94 corridor. but we also have a fairly large presence in what we call our correspondent. We do a lot of bank-to-bank business, so we help a lot of banks and then a number of Midwest states finance their ag producers. For example, I've got large producers in Iowa and Minnesota and Illinois and Montana, Wyoming, whatever. So we get to see a lot of different things, and even though that we're working with another bank, we have boots on the ground. We go out and we talk to these people and meet these people, and it really is interesting because Red River Valley is very, very strong, but it's not necessarily just the epicenter of ag world.
No,
right?
not quite.
There's a lot of things that go on in the rest of the country.
Plus, our diversity. We're not as diverse here in the Red River Valley as some other areas. We have a lot of corn, soybeans. We do, of course, have sugar beets, dry edible beans, etc. But as you move to some of those other areas, you start to see many more specialty crops, and also livestock incorporated into their operations. And so when you have a young farmer coming in wants to visit with you, some of those first steps I'm sure are putting together a business plan with them.
Exactly.
When you're doing that, do you see any red flags that pop up when you see specialty crop production or livestock, or the folks who are really just starting from nothing? What are some of those red flags that might come up for you?
First of all, it's unfortunate that it is very, very hard for a new young producer to start, right? I mean, access to land or capital, unless you're either born into it or for whatever reason have a connection to somebody that's already there. It is. I get that question all the time. How does a young producer? And I don't have a good answer for that necessarily because it is hard. But you hit upon it. I mean, it is possible. Have a sound business plan. Your break evens. You've got some contracts. You've got scenario planning. You do cash flows. Maybe you got some off-farm income. You're doing a lot of different things to offset that family living, or to do the things you're doing, snow removal in the wintertime. We've got some success stories out there, but you gotta take small bites and work your way up. But with respect to specialty stuff, that's a knife that cuts both ways, right? I mean, it is, there's some risk in that, but outside of just producing raw bulk commodities of soybeans and corn, whatever, if you can create some extra value in doing some of those things and do it right, maybe that's the ticket that helps you make that next step.
We're going to have to. We need some differentiation.
And Lynn, we got an email question from one of our listeners. Is there anything that any crop specifically like hemp, that you won't insure, or that you won't loan? That's what I meant.
Yeah. You really hit upon the one, and that's probably hemp. There's really still, there's some banking regulations, whatever. It doesn't mean that we can't do it, but we got to go through a lot of hoops, to make that work, right? So I would say hemp is probably the big one. Outside of that, for the most part, I mean, if it makes sense and it makes financial sense, from specialty crops to mint to you name it, whatever. If there's a market for it and they've got a history in it, or they've got some upsides to that, it's possible.
Do you think as hemp becomes a little more popular to grow in some areas, that the loopholes will change a little bit? It'll be a little easier?
Yeah, I think if nothing else, the political climate, right, is moving in that direction where, it's becoming more socially accepted, I guess, if you will.
But even industrial hemp.
Industrial hemp, exactly, yeah. If they can find the proper uses, whether it be, a replacement for concrete, I mean, there's a lot of different things they can do with that. So I think we're probably in the early innings of a 9-inning game of where that that can go.
Yeah.
Right.
But I think there is some opportunities for that.
Tagging along on that, if you were a lender in the southeast part of the U.S., would tobacco be a concern because of those social feelings about it?
Yeah, I don't think so. Whatever. Okay. I mean, and you've got your ESG policies out there,
yes.
And different things, and some of your investment funds have got some problems with some of that. But no, I don't think so. I think most banks that are in those areas, it's been they've grown it for how many generations, for 250 years, and if it makes sense, economically, I would think most banks would do that.
So one of the things that we wanted to visit about, one last question as far as land, and I know you've got some notes on it. What are some of those factors that are currently impacting our land values? What has changed for us over the last couple of years where we've seen that run up?
I think a couple of major factors. One is there's a lot of cash out there, right?
Yep.
And farmers generally don't like to sit on a lot of cash. And if they've got cash, they like to reinvest it back in the farm. So there's been, I've been doing this as a mentor for a long time. That stretch for grain producers at 20, 21, 22, I've never seen as much money made in those in that period of time. So that definitely, I think the other big factor though is the supply demand. I mean, there's still way too many buyers chasing too few sellers. But I think that's going to change for a number of reasons. Number one, if there's a perception land values have leveled off or even declined a little bit, you'll see more people wanting to get in the game and catching the high price, right?
They do.
The other is the intergenerational transfer of wealth. There's studies out there that show, or for example, in Iowa, 1/3 of the land is owned by producers 75 years old and older, right?
The federal statistic, I believe, is average age of farmers in the U.S. is 56 years old, and in the next 15 years, 2/3 of the U.S. farmland is going to change hands.
Yeah. So even if it's 1/3, you've got 100 million acres potentially. It's going to now it maybe stays within the family, but a lot of that is going to, potentially come on the market. You've got tax law changes. If they ever get rid of the stepped up bases and things like that. So there's a lot of things. But I would say right now the number one factor is supply demand, and there's still a lot of dollars chasing too few sellers.
You've got livestock producers that have been enjoying some high prices because that is like potatoes. That is a feast or famine situation for beef producers, and especially for dairy as well. But as we've seen beef prices growing, are you seeing more folks saying, I want to buy a few cows to get started, even though it's kind of the high if you're going to start adding to a herd? What does that look like for some of your farmers?
It's interesting. I just spent a week out in Montana and Wyoming, and I talked to a couple of banking groups out there, and those, I like those guys out there, right? those they're true West River cowboys, and they are honest, authentic, genuine, whatever. So, but as you well know, given this livestock cycle, a lot of those heifers that were being held back in 2013, 2014, they're going to the feedlots, right? I mean, you don't see that expansion for a number of reasons. So, whether it be buying the $3,000 bred heifers and trying to make that work, they're being much more judicious a little bit in terms, and, again, a lot of those cow-calf guys are getting up in age, things like that. So we're not seeing that expansion take place. I would be real hesitant as a banker to come in and lend too much money on that because, given it's like 30 months from the time a calf is born till it's slaughtered, you wouldn't think that the livestock thing could fall off the table, but it did. It did. And I think the other thing from a livestock standpoint is right now the economy, and you could have a discussion on that, is strong and why it's strong. But at some point, our consumers going to be willing to pay that high price for those high cuts of beef, right?
That's right.
I mean, I probably have more concern about the general economy as it affects livestock than the livestock sector itself.
You had an interesting comment as Dina and I talked earlier about cattle rustling, still happens. And you said that is an area of concern for bankers.
If you get bankers and if they ever get together and talk about the bad stories in ag lending, it always comes back to cattle. I mean, it really does. Yeah. They're mobile, they can move, they're saleable, things like that. And sometimes, when guys get in trouble, they kind of lose their moral compass, right? And they do things that they otherwise wouldn't do. So, it is, like I said, it's pretty easy to move, it's pretty easy to sell, things like that. So we do see, and you've seen some really large deals across the country in the last 2-3 years, whether it be the Agridime, the deal down in South Dakota, Easter Day out in Western Washington, the big one down in Texas, Kentucky, where 78,000 head of cattle weren't there.
Right.
And part of that is as lenders, you probably should know what's there, right? You should be doing your inspections, and it's
yes.
To kind of know that. So it's just you can't get complacent on that.
And then you're hosting a special event in July. Can you tell us a little bit about that? Yeah,
we call it our Ag Views Live session. This will be the 10th year that we've done it. We do one in Fargo on July 15th. It's going to be at the Hilton Garden Inn from about 8 to 12. We feed you before and after. We do one in Sioux Falls on the 16th and one out in Wisconsin Dells on the 17th. And it's myself and Dr. David Cole. I've known Dr. Cole for like 30 years. I mean, he's probably the most preeminent ag finance guy in the country, and he's not your typical economist, right?
No, he's
High
actually
energy.
fun to listen
He's
to.
fun to listen to, and he makes it really, really entertaining. But he drives home a really, really, really great point. so we'll be doing that. I do a little bit. I'm going to talk a little bit about, have we seen this movie before? And and my thought on that, this is the current ag economy, especially with respect to grain, seems an awful like what happened in 2013, right? I mean, it just seems a little bit eerie, similar, whatever. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons I've learned and maybe some of the things to think about and that successful operations did to navigate through that. We'll talk a little bit about that. And one of the things that we do at the end that is kind of interesting, that's really kind of taken over as a number one thing that people want to, we just do a Q&A. We call it our ESPN hot seat.
Yes.
Right? I mean, it is. And we take questions probably for an hour. I mean, we'll take all comers, whatever, and we want to talk about what you want to talk about. So it really, and of course, Cole can make that super interesting.
Well, and especially, you have such a long career in lending with all those experiences from the highs and the lows.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, Dr. David Cole, who I follow his articles in Farm Future magazine. And there's lots of good things to be learned there. So I think that'll be a pretty good day. And again, for those who want to get more information and or to register, you're going to want to go to bell.bank/registration/agviews-live. And you know what? If you just email me here at the station, ag@flagfamily.com, I have the email address and I'll send it right off to you so you can get on there. Because I've attended, I plan to attend again, and it's well worth it just to listen to what's being said.
One of the things that I think that is interesting, because there's a lot of good studies and a lot of surveys out there, whatever, but a lot of those are looking back, right, in terms of what has already happened. What we talk about is in the moment, and we see, we kind of roll back the curtain a little bit, what's really going on in farm operations, because we get to know the producers and really get to know them well in their finances and things like that most other people don't get a look at, right? So, and we pull that up in aggregate. We get a chance to look at that, and while a producer just sees their own operation, I mean, I probably see 200, right? I mean, and so you can start making some observations about, what are some of the best practices and things like that.
Oh, and it's best to follow those practices.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you, Lynn, for joining us today. And again, for those who maybe missed part of our conversation, you can follow us on our website. We also live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Acres TV. So you can catch up with all the conversation that we've been having with Lynn Paulson, Senior Vice President with Ag Lending at Bell Bank here in Fargo. We have more to catch up on as far as headlines and weather. So we will do that right after this. go. I just thought I'd give you the wind sound effects. I'm here to help.
Welcome back to Weather and Ag in Focus, 1:53 in the afternoon. Temperature here at the studio, 73 degrees. A light breeze out of the southeast. It's outside of the cloud cover. You know, it's nice to have a light wind day out there. We just can't seem to string everything together, can we?
It was a little intense for a couple of days there.
Ugh.
I had a farmer friend in Iowa who sent a message after watching the weather forecast, and he said, "How do you guys get anything sprayed up there?
Right.
The wind blows."
Yeah.
Now today,
Well, they were out spraying
today looks good. Today they sprayed our field.
our fields for Here We Grow project, so that's good news there. And you said the crop was looking good.
Crop does look good. We had some photos up on our live stream here a little while ago, and now it's going to be really easy to identify because our Here We Grow sign is now up on the field as well, right along Clay County 26.
Good deal.
Yeah,
Good
people
deal.
do
Ahead of
see it.
schedule, you think?
As our corn crop,
Yeah.
I think we're right on. We
Okay.
got in. This field got in earlier versus a lot of acres. In fact, I know there was corn and soybeans planted over the weekend, last week and into the weekend.
Gotcha.
A lot going on.
All right. Well, let's run down the forecast real quick, and then we'll hit a couple of ag topics. We've got cloudy skies, again, 73 here at the studio with a light southeast breeze. It's 85 out at Hector. No, it's not that. It's not that big.
Good grief.
We are looking at more cloud cover throughout the afternoon. Again, if you have outdoor afternoon plans, you're going to be okay. It'll be dry. But after about 7, 8 o'clock tonight, we're going to start to see showers and storms pushing in from the south and west. That's some what we call warm air advection showers and storms. And typically, those are non-severe, and those during the evening hours after 7, 8 o'clock are not expected to become severe. Those will push northward, and then I think we'll see a little break, and then overnight, that's when we're going to see more storms pulling in from the west and southwest, and some of those could be on the strong to severe side. We do have a flood watch in effect for the entire area and most of the state of Minnesota. Now, does that mean everybody's going to receive flooding? No, it doesn't. But kind of like in the wintertime when we see banding of the snow, we'll have banding of these storms. And if you get caught under one of those bands, there might be a narrow area that picks up 1 to 3 inches of rain, and then let's say 10 miles down the road, you're about a quarter to a half inch. So that's what we're going to be dealing with overnight. And again, the main severe threat with this would be large hail, but even that threat, it's not that high, but it's still there. So don't be surprised if you get woken up in the middle of the night with some strong thunderstorms. Those storms will continue into Tuesday through about lunchtime before that starts to wind down. Winds will shift to the west-northwest. We'll have an early high on Tuesday in the low 70s in the morning, then falling during the afternoon, and then down into the 40s tomorrow night, and more sunshine returns for Wednesday and Thursday, with Thursday being the pick day of the week. Highs on Wednesday, low 70s, Thursday, mid to upper 70s. And then another storm system comes our way Friday into Saturday with more storms and, again, the possibility of heavy rain with that system coming in at the end of the week. But if you're already looking forward to next weekend, again, Saturday looks a little wet, but Sunday looks nice. It might start out breezy, but I think winds will calm down by later in the day on Sunday. So at least we'll get one nice weekend day in there.
We will get several, I'm sure. So Addison mentioned that we had a caller asking if I knew anything about Plowville and if one is happening this year. Okay, so my guess is, without more information, I think this probably has to do with sometimes there are antique machinery plowing bees in the area. I know there's one that happens up around Blanchard each year. I think there's a couple in Minnesota. I am not aware of a date for any right now, but for those who may know more, if you are planning one of the antique tractor plowing bees, why don't you let me know? You can drop me a message, ag@flagfamily.com, and I will go ahead and find out more information and share that with the rest of our listeners as well. There might be something like that, where you want to get on a older tractor with a 2 or 3 bottom plowed in and go out and turn some dirt.
That sounds like a lot of work.
It's not so bad,
No?
unless it's hot and windy and a lot of bugs. I mean, I know I'm
middle of summer.
well,
so in
these-
other words, don't do it in the middle of summer.
Yeah, these are all open station tractors. I mean, I know I'm really selling this for you right now. It'll be fine. Not the worst that can happen.
We got time for one ag topic. I will let you.
Well, and there's
pick.
one other thing to mention, and that is this week is the World Association of Sugar Beet and Sugar Cane Growers coming to North Dakota. We've
that's
talked
right.
about this before on air. Because the current world president is David Thompson from right here in the Northern Red River Valley, that's the reason it's coming to the U.S. We'll be hosting it here in Fargo at NDSU and other locations. They'll be touring the area not only for manufacturing, but for farms, and a lot of comparison from the representative 40 different countries who will be here, what's happening in their countries when it comes to policy, production, and so much more.
Nice. Well, that'll do it for the Monday edition of Weather and Ag in Focus. I want to thank everybody for joining us. And don't go anywhere. The #1 afternoon talk show in the land. That's right, in the land is up next. The Jay Thomas Show. Don't go anywhere.